Are Christian thriller books horror books? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Zoe's Bookcase, where we talk about faith, theology, and my bookcase. I think that this conversation is very fascinating, and I think that horror and thriller and suspense are commonly genres that get kind of mixed together. So, of course, some people would be calling a Christian thriller or suspense novel a horror book. I definitely do see why it would be called a horror book, because there are definitely some pretty intense Christian thrillers out there that are pretty creepy. Before we jump into it and start talking about the books that I've seen people call kind of horror or horror-esque, I would like to define horror and horror books in specific. Horror books is a genre of literature designed to elicit strong feelings of fear, dread, shock, or revulsion in the reader. And I definitely can see some of these books we're going to be talking about. There's a lot of creepy moments. There's definitely some moments where I was shocked. There was definitely some moments where I felt revulsion or disgust. And there was definitely moments where I feared for the characters, but I never feared for myself throughout these books. And I think that that's a very pivotal distinction that I want to talk about here in a minute. Throughout these books, you could still see themes of hope, love, faith, and also, most importantly, God and his hand throughout the situations in these books. And so, for every creepy moment, you could still see God working in the background, even though obviously it's a book written by an author, it's not actually happening and it's not actually God. But each of these authors did a really beautiful job of incorporating how God works through the bad moments and turns them for his glory in each of these books. And I think that that was really beautiful, and that's a big reason why Christian thriller and suspense books are becoming one of my favorite genres very quickly. Anyway, so the first book I kind of want to jump into and talk about today is one that you all are probably very familiar with, and you might have even read yourself, is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And this is C.S. Lewis's interpretation of an ongoing conversation between two demons. And one of the demons, his name is Screwtape, and he's the uncle of the other demon that he's talking with, and his name is Wormwood. And they're kind of exchanging letters because Screwtape is a senior demon. He's kind of retired, kind of, supervising things. And Wormwood is assigned to tempt this person. All these demons, they're assigned to tempt one person in this world. And he's assigned to tempt this person, and he's asking his uncle for advice throughout these letters. And his uncle is giving him advice. And so throughout these letters, there are many, many quotes I could sit here all day and talk about, because there are some beautiful quotes from this book. Sorry, I keep looking down at my notes so I don't forget where I'm at, because some of these books have some pretty complex themes, and I don't want to get them mixed up. But this theme, the theme of this book is encouragement, hope, and God's unfailing love for us. And I found it really beautiful because throughout these letters and these kind of correspondences, you see this deep love that God has for us. And C.S. Lewis does a beautiful job of outlining how God understands the weakness of our flesh, and he only is concerned with our heart and our mind, and if it's focused on him, and if we're following him to the best of our abilities, and we're seeking his truth above all else. And I think that he did a wonderful job outlining that, and it was such a beautiful read, and I highly recommend it. I think I gave this book like a 4.5 stars out of 5. um it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I can definitely see why some people would think that this is a horror book, because it is very dark, and it is literally demons talking to each other about how to feed off of this soul. And there's definitely points where it was creepy, and there were definitely passages that you read that you were like, whew, that was creepy, that was heavy, that was deep. And so I definitely think that this could be taken as a horror book. But however, I personally do not think that it's a horror book. It's actually a satirical book, and you definitely see that throughout the writing. And it was really well done. But yeah, it is very creepy. Oh, and a quick disclaimer: all the books I'm going to be talking about today are adult novels explicitly. And so I believe that only adults, unless you are a very mature teenager, like 16 and up, should be reading these books. Now, this one, the Screw Tape Letters, is one that I would be more lenient on than the other ones because it's a little bit more light-hearted, but it's still very heavy than the other ones that we'll be talking about. And so all the books I'm talking about today are adult novels and should be read with viewer discretion because they do talk about very heavy and dark topics, especially one later that I do not think that anyone under the age of 18 should read, and I will make it clear which book that is when we talk about it. But yeah, so that's the Screw Tape Letters. I don't think that is a horror book. I think that it is more satirical, as it states it is, and it has such a beautiful message, and you leave it feeling very encouraged in your walk with God, or at least I did. Now, the next book that I've seen a few people talk about, and they actually call this author the Christian Stephen King. I don't know how many people do that, but I heard it when I was kind of looking back at the book to refresh my memory of it because it's been a minute since I read it. And that is This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti. Now, horror is actually in the genre name of this book, and I could see why. It's based on a New Age group enslaving a town, and a reporter named Bernice Krugel, I think that's how you say it. That might not be how you say her last name, but anyway, we're gonna move past that because, yeah. And Marshall Hogan start investigating and discovering a dark plot. As they go through the book, they start to see a lot of things come that are more supernatural and are unexplainable. And so you're kind of seeing that this from their point of view, but then we get another point of view from actual angels and demons. And a good portion of this book is written through that POV where we're kind of seeing it play out as an angel. And I can't remember if there was a demon POV in it or not. I think there was, but it has been a minute since I read it. But I definitely know that there was an angel POV. And it was really fascinating. This book highlights the importance of prayer and a church community. A little kind of the B plot of the book is a pastor trying to win the love of his congregation. He's kind of unwanted. His congregation hasn't accepted him yet. He's new, he's young, and so he's discovering kind of this spiritual side of the town while Bernice and Marshall are kind of discovering their own part of it, and he's praying, and he kind of has his own side story, and it's a really well done book. I did think it was a little on the nose at times, and I do think that it was a little predictable, but it was really well done. I think I gave it like a 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad read. It wasn't the best read I'd ever had. I haven't even read the second book yet. But I did really enjoy the theme throughout it of God working through evil for his good, and of hope and, faith and prayer and community. I loved it, and it was really well done. And I definitely recommend it. I think that it's definitely a book that if you are kind of interested in spiritual warfare, it's definitely a book I think that you would enjoy. And I could definitely see why some people would think that it was more horror. There were some very demonic parts of it. There were some scenes where you were kind of seeing these new age practices happen, and they were really dark, and there were scenes of, like, real demons, obviously not real, but demons in this book. And obviously this is Frank Peretti's interpretation of spiritual warfare and what it looks like in relation with a new age group, and there were some parts of it that was really dark and really disturbing. And as someone who has listened to a lot of testimonies of ex-witches and New Age, I definitely can see where he got his inspiration from. And it was really well done. and it was really creepy, and there were definitely some parts where you felt a little hopeless for the characters. But again, I don't think that this is a horror book, even though horror is in the genre name. Again, I think this book is more about faith and trusting God than it is about instilling fear and disgust and dread. And so, yeah, again, highly recommend it if you enjoy that kind of thing. But it is kind of a harder book to get through. I remember it kind of took me a minute to get into it, so just be warned. It's kind of a slower book to get into. The next book I kind of want to talk about is a book I actually just recently read, and I actually have it. The other ones I don't have, but I have it. This is my library's copy, and it's The Girl Behind the Red Rope by Ted and Rochelle Decker. And I really enjoyed this book. I actually gave it 5 stars because the message, the way that they delivered the message of faith and hope was just so brilliantly well done that I gave it 5 stars just for that alone. And also the writing wasn't bad, and I loved the main character. The main character was really complex and really well done. Anyway, I haven't even told you what it's about, so let me actually tell you what it's about. So, it's about a cult living in like the Tennessee valleys, and they've been living there for about 10 years now, and they are following the guidance of this strange, mysterious man who has this strange power. And they're kind of afraid of these kind of monsters that are supposedly devouring the world. And so they're supposed to stay inside this community, and this community is outlined by a red rope. And, red ropes in some other religions, they symbolize, protection from, evil and warding off spirits and things. And so I think that that's where they took that inspiration from, and I thought that was fascinating. Now, Grace is our main character, and she's trying to understand this kind of mystery that these 2 outsiders bring into the community, and she's trying to crack like who these people are. And so while she's kind of cracking that case, she's experiencing some very demonic activities. And so, yeah, it was very good. There were definitely some scenes where you were kind of on the edge of your seat. And in fact, it's very action-packed. I had a hard time putting it down because it was just one thing after another, and I really enjoyed it. It was really well done. I think the pacing was really good because it would just be action, 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 and then you'd get this like small period of rest and then action, action. It was really well done. It kept me hooked. And again, I really loved Grace's character. I found myself kind of relating with her a lot, and I think that she was really well written. And there were some really creepy quotes from a specific character in this book that every single time that she would speak her beliefs, I was like, wow, that is crazy. And so I definitely recommend this book. Again, it is darker, but I don't think it's too dark. It's all about fear and about how fear can control us. And it's really well done. I don't want to talk too much about it because since I just read it, I kind of want to tell you all the things about it. And I would love to do a deep dive in this book if you guys are interested, because I think the faith elements and the theological elements in this is just so beautifully done. And I was looking up Bible verses while reading this book, and there is one specific quote that is still stuck in my mind where I was just looking up so many verses about because it was just so crazy. And so, yeah, this was really well done. Definitely a read I recommend people reading if you enjoy a good suspense book. Again, I don't think that this is a horror book because even though the whole book is about fear, about halfway through the book, you start to see it kind of flip a little bit. And you start to see some other themes come out. I really recommend it. But again, I don't think that it was a horror book because just the theme of it, it never instilled fear in me. It only instilled a message of encouragement and hope. And so, yeah, definitely recommend, but again, don't think it was a horror book. The next one I kind of want to talk about is The Other Sister. Now, this is not one that I've seen people talk about. Well, I did see a booktuber talk about this book before, and that's why I picked it up and read it. Now, this book is the book that I was going to say is 18 plus. I do not think anyone under the age of 18 should read this book. It is very mature. It is very dark, and it talks deeply about deep sins. Like, the middle of the book, hold on, I didn't even tell you who wrote it. So it's The Other Sister by Jessica R. Patch. And this is my first book that I've picked up by her, and I really did enjoy her writing style. So it's about, our main character is Charlotte Kane, and she has kind of drawn the short end of the stick. She has a, she has a drug abusive mother, and she's finally living on her own, but she's kind of encountering all these issues, and she's not really sure how to get out of this hole. She can't make enough money, she can't do what she wants to do, and so she kind of dreams about that perfect life. And I know we've all been there, like, oh, if I just had her life, or if I just, well, she gets to live that, because she finds out about 2 days after her mother dies, she finds out that she is actually an identical twin, and her sister Aislinn Benedict has everything that she's ever wanted. She's successful, she's rich, she has her own business, she's an influencer, like she has it all. Well, something happens, and Charlotte ends up taking over Aislinn's life and identity. And as she goes deeper into Aislinn's life, she realizes that her life is not as glamorous as it may seem. And so, yeah, this book was really well done. It kind of has a dual timeline playing in the background that kind of keeps you hooked from the start. I did have to put it down a few times and take a little break from it, because the middle of this book gets really, really, really dark. Some sins kind of come out about one of the characters that are just pretty crazy. And so the reason why all my other books are kind of about spiritual warfare that we've kind of talked about in this video, but the reason why I put this book in this is because, one, it felt the most like a horror book to me. It definitely did. Now, I've never really read a horror book before. Horror's just not really my genre, so it's not like I have personal experience and know exactly what a horror book is, because I don't believe I've actually ever read one. I can't remember ever reading one. But this one felt like a horror book and felt kind of in that category of fear. And it was really intense. There were very many scenes where I was like, whew, like just disgusted by what had happened, or just shocked. But again, this book never made me feel fearful. I never felt afraid. And I think that that's a big part of horror, is it wants you to feel afraid. It wants you, even at the very end, when it's over, to still have that lingering fear. And I never felt fearful reading this book. And so that's why I don't think that it is a horror book necessarily. This one, like a 3.25 stars, because that middle part got really dark. The only reason why I didn't end up DNFing it is because it didn't glorify the sin, and there were actively consequences going against the sin. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because the ending is a really beautiful ending on forgiveness and on, how we all fail as sinners. And so, really good, but again, very dark. I would look at the content warnings in this book before you pick it up, because there are many, many things in here that I think would trigger people. But it was really good. I did enjoy it. Now, the last book I kind of want to talk about is kind of like a thrown-in little book, and that is The Last Sin Eater by Francine Rivers. I know that's not really a book that you would expect to see on a list like this, but I did I did see someone call this a horror book, and I could see where they got it. It is actually classified as a dark historical fiction book. Because obviously Francine Rivers is a historical fiction writer and she does it really well. But I listened to this book, I think a year and a half to 2 years ago, and it was really good. I enjoyed it. It was very creepy. So it's based off of the mid-century. There was like kind of a group of people who believed that they needed someone to take away their sins. And so they would appoint someone every generation whose entire life's mission was to eat the sins of those in his community and then die and take their place in hell. And so obviously he didn't die for every single person that died. He died, just when he died. And he would basically serve out the sentence of hell for everyone he'd eaten their sins for, so that they could go to heaven. So he basically took their place. It was a very twisted version of the gospel. And so she kind of took that idea and she wrote a community who was still following this. And you kind of have a missionary who comes in and is trying to reveal the truth to these people and teach them the gospel. And our main character, I cannot remember her name. I will put it up. She's like trying to solve who's telling the truth and who's not. And so it's a beautiful journey of kind of the gospel. And it was really well done, but man, it was pretty creepy. There were some rituals and things that the community did that were just really, really spooky and were like left you shocked. So I definitely see why some people would think that it was a horror book, because it was creepy. I remember being creeped out by their practices and by what they were doing. I thought that it was so weird. But again, I don't think that this was a horror book because I didn't feel fear again, and I didn't leave with an impression of fear. And I think that when you're thinking about a horror book, you should be leaving with fear, because that's kind of the genre. It's kind of, horror books are meant to instill this kind of fear in you. And so when you leave, you think about it. And sometimes they're trying to warn you about something, and sometimes, they're trying to teach you something, or sometimes they're just trying to, just for shock value. And I just don't feel like any of these books had that in it. Throughout this book, though, before I get off on a tangent, you kind of see this theme of again, hope and love and peace and God working through evil practices to bring about his good. Now I think I gave this book like a 3.2 stars, and the only reason why I really did that was because the missionary, I didn't really love his character, and I didn't really connect with him very well, and he was a very central part of the story, and so because of that, it kind of took away from my reading experience. But it was still really well done, and I would definitely consider rereading it, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who kind of wants something a little bit more creepy but still not too creepy. Obviously, this isn't all the Christian thriller and suspense novels. This isn't even all the Christian, like, spiritual warfare novels. And there's obviously a lot more. And so maybe one of the other ones I've read, I would actually put in the horror category. But I think the closest book that I've read recently that kind of went into that was The Other Sister, just because of the villain in that story. The villain was just very demonic, very Satan-like, and I think that was the only book that I really felt was maybe horror. In conclusion, I don't think that Christian thriller or slash spiritual warfare books are horror books. I think that horror books are more, I've kind of been insinuating this throughout my reviews, and I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, I think that they're more about instilling fear. And so even though in most horror books and movies and stuff, the good guys do typically seem to win, a lot of those pieces of media, you're walking away paranoid. You're looking over your shoulder. You're kind of like spooked. But in all these books, I didn't leave feeling fearful, and I didn't feel fearful throughout the book either. I didn't get paranoid, and none of that. And so I don't believe that they are horror books. I think that most spiritual warfare books are primarily themed around hope and how God works through the bad things and turns them to his good and his glory and his will. And so I don't believe that we should be flippantly calling something horror when it comes to something that is faith based, because I think that that takes away from the themes that the authors are trying to teach people throughout these books, which is hope and love and God's grace. And so, yeah, we also have to remember when we pick up these books, spiritual warfare is real. And even though these books are an interpretation of that spiritual warfare and are obviously not 100% correct or based in truth, we have to remember that our faith in Jesus and the power in the Holy Ghost that we have, hell has no power over us. And so the only power that demons in hell have over us is the power that we give it. And so if you are a believing Christian who understands that simple truth and you go into these books, you're not going to feel fearful because you already know that hell is lost. And so anything that they're doing, it's like C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters. They are just trying their best. They are desperate. They are desperate to just keep souls out of heaven. And so when you're already walking the path to heaven, you don't have to fear hell or the demons, because they literally cannot do anything for them. There's actually a beautiful quote in C.S. Lewis's book about how there are certain people who are covered and they cannot touch them because they are covered completely at all times. And so when we are living in that truth, things like this doesn't scare us because we know who wins in the end. That is my personal opinion, obviously. If you still think that any of these books are horror books, or if you still feel like they are, that's completely fine. That's just what I think. I think that we should be careful when talking about horror in relation with Christ, because again, it's very rooted deeply in fear. And God is just not, he's not a God of fear. He's a God of love. And so, yeah, that's my take on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys got some good book recommendations, because I definitely recommend all the books I talked about today. I enjoyed each and every single one of them, some more than others, like The Screw Tape Letters and The Girl Behind the Red Rope is probably the two I would tell you to read if you don't want to read any of the other ones, but those two for sure should pick up if you're interested in a good Christian thriller, or, in C.S. Lewis's case, a satire book. But yeah, I think that's all today. Drop a comment if you think that any of these books are horror, or if you agree with me, or if you think that maybe you read another book and it was definitely horror. I'd love to see what you guys kind of think about this topic, because I think that it's a really fascinating conversation. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye.